Hello Rebel and welcome back to my life. You remember that last week I went to the town of Astoria on Oregon's northern border. Well, Astoria is also the location of the classic 80s film The Goonies. On Thursday, my oldest friend Zach came into town, and he has been a huge fan of The Goonies ever since he was a kid, and so he and I went to Astoria again, without Meg or the kids, just the two of us. Astoria is a truly beautiful town, and I feel like I didn't do enough to highlight that in my videos last week. It is small and quaint and old and historical, and it feels coastal even though it's technically standing beside a river and not the ocean. It's got history not only as a trading town and a port for ships, but also the location of so many classic Hollywood films. And Kindergarten Cop. As a result, there has been a very conscious effort in Astoria to keep things the same. They obviously have all of the modern amenities, but there are also clearly houses that have stood there since the beginning of the 20th century or even earlier. The jailhouse has been there for more than 100 years, and if it's been converted from a correctional facility into a film museum, you can still smell the history in its walls. The Flavel House, which was built by a wealthy ship captain in the late 1800s, is also a museum. In fact, it's the museum where Brand and Mikey's dad worked in the movie The Goonies. And with a maritime museum down by the water, it is entirely possible that Astoria has more museums per square mile than any other town in the US. Once we'd soaked in the history of Astoria, Zach and I were considering going home, but as we were driving back towards the freeway that would have taken us south back to McMinnville, we saw the bridge that spanned the Columbia River and led into Washington State, and so we decided to cross it. I don't know exactly how to explain the phenomenon that occurs when you hang out with Zach. You just tend to get pulled into fun experiences and interesting adventures, and if the opportunity to do something exciting comes up, you just kind of always say yes. So we crossed the massive, beautiful bridge, and then we drove up the Washington coastline for a while, and then we stopped, and we found a couple of freshwater oysters and broke them open looking for pearls, which we did not find, by the way. Then we drove even farther, because I figured that if we'd come this far, then we should at least make it to the Washington coastline, and it was a much longer drive than I'd originally anticipated, but eventually we found it. We came to an overlook above the shore where the coastline ran for miles to the south, and the waves came crashing in louder than I'd ever heard them before, and we watched the sunset. Just around the next bend in the path, we found a lighthouse that had been there for more than 150 years, so we took some pictures of that. Zach is very active on Instagram, by the way. I'll put his Instagram in the description, and you should follow him there, but not me, because I never post anything. What was weird about this experience was that I've been seeing the ocean pretty much my whole life. Anybody in LA has, but this was the first time where I really understood people who are pulled towards the sea. LA's beaches never made me want to sail out across the Pacific, but the Washington coastline did, even though it was cold and wet and looked much less forgiving. And then we finally drove home, but we hadn't had dinner yet, so when we got back to McMinnville, we stopped in at the Hotel Oregon, and after we ate dinner, we dropped down into the Speakeasy bar in the basement, which is one of the coolest spots in the entire town. And there was live music there, two performers who were covering Michael Jackson and Leonard Cohen in this crooning, tortured guitar and saxon vocals combo that was just incredible. In the end, it was a fairly typical day with Zach, but it was also the first real day off I'd had in forever, because days off with the kids don't really count until they're older. And I was so grateful for the experience and the food and the many hours that we spent on the road listening to Hamilton. I think I drove for more than 6 hours yesterday, and I realized that I need to go out on random adventures more often, so if you will excuse me, I will end the video here, because I have to go convince Zach to move here. Otherwise, how am I going to go adventuring? Thank you so much for watching, Rebel. Thank you to my patrons for your incredible support, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye!